This sikha is in connection to both Parshas Vayero as well as Chof Cheshvon, the Yom Haledes, the birthday of the Rebbe Rashab. Very famous story that the Rebbe discussed a number of times with various different lessons, and here the Rebbe focuses on another aspect of the story. A story that the Frierdiker Rebbe told over about the Rebbe Rashab. That when the Rebbe Rashab was about 4 or 5 years old, it was Shabbos Parshas Vayero, he went into his grandfather, the Tzemach Tzedek, and he came in crying. He says, why is it that Hashem appears to Avraham Avinu and he doesn't appear to me, doesn't appear to us? To which the Tzemach Tzedek responds that when a Yid Tzaddik decides at the age of 99 years old to have a bris, he's deserving that Hashem should appear to him. Now, in this particular sikha, the Rebbe is focusing on the idea that the Frierdiker Rebbe, when telling the story, mentioned the idea that the Rebbe Rashab was 4 or 5 years old at the time, which tells us that there's a hayra in the story for the chinuch of a child of 4 or 5 years old. In other words, even for a little simple child, a child in the literal sense, there's a hayra in this story as well, as far as of how chinuch needs to take place. Now, even though you might say, how could anybody compare to the Rebbe Rashab? How could you compare a regular, simple, ordinary child to the Rebbe Rashab? Nevertheless, says the Rebbe, because this is a story that was told to us by the Rebbe, by the Frierdiker Rebbe, and he printed it, definitely it has a hayra. And again, because it was emphasized that he was 4 and 5 years old, that means there is some connection and some lesson to those that are 4 or 5 years old. But how can we understand that? How does it make sense to say that the Rebbe Rashab can be in the same category as another 4 or 5 year old child? And the Rebbe explains something very, very interesting. The Rebbe says that generally we know that there is a difference between the mitzvahs that were done before Matan Torah and the mitzvahs the way they're done after Matan Torah. That is, that the mitzvahs that were done before Matan Torah, the avos, the way they did them, so although they used certain physical objects in doing the mitzvahs, but the main focus was more about the person's, the tzaddik's own connection to Hashem. And the way Chassidus explains it is that each tzaddik was able to reach, based on his avodah, he's able to reach Hashem according to the shorish, to the source of his own neshama. Whereas after Matan Torah, it makes no difference how high or how simple a yid is. After Matan Torah, there were certain instructions given by Hashem of how a mitzvah needs to be done. There are certain measurements, certain ideas, certain ways how the mitzvah has to be done. But then, regardless who you are, you do the mitzvah, and then it achieves in a much greater way than that which the avos achieved before Matan Torah, because this is the way it was prescribed by Hashem. The Rebbe says the same thing is true regarding to ages. That there's an age that was given, for example, the idea of bar mitzvah, so it doesn't make a difference how smart or simple the child is before bar mitzvah. He's not going to be chayiv b'mitzvahs min haTorah. He won't be able to join a minyan. If he's bar mitzvah already, so you might say, but he's not even such a smart child, but this is the way the Torah prescribed this particular age. That means now he could draw down, because this is what Hashem said, the mitzvah is going to be achieved based on this particular action, then the child could achieve this. Says the Rebbe, the same thing is true in regards to the idea, the age of chinuch. There's a particular age that's set by the age of 6. The Gemara says, where one Amoira said to another Amoira, he's speaking about accepting students. He says, don't accept under the age of 6, but from the age of 6, take the child and stuff him with Torah like an ox, as you would stuff an ox. Says the Rebbe, what do we see over here? That even though it's true that even within education there are many levels and many stages and ages, nevertheless, there's a particular age that we say that before this age, a child is still not shaykh to the full chinuch, and after this age, now he's fully shaykh to the complete chinuch. And therefore, applying this back now to the story of the Rebbe Rashab, since it was emphasized and pointed out that he's a 4 or 5 year old boy, meaning he's under the age of 6, under the halachic age of Torah of full chinuch, then therefore even other children, seemingly maybe just a simple child, but because he's in this general category of under 6, that means he's also shaykh to this particular form of chinuch. And what is the message over here? That even a little child of 4 or 5 years old, a child that's under the age of chinuch, could be desiring, could be yearning for Elikus in such a strong way, to such an extent, it bothers him so much that Hashem doesn't appear to him, to the extent that he's crying, that he's so bothered by this. And again, this is shaykh not only to someone on the level of the caliber of the Rebbe Rashab, but that we can educate every single child that this should be his concern, this should be what he really wants, because this becomes his life. And the Rebbe says there's a tremendous chiddush over here, because the Rambam tells us that the way we usually educate children, depending on their age, we try to give them things that they get excited about, that they like. And therefore, a little child, we're going to give him sweets, we're going to give him nuts till he grows up and he matures, etc., etc. And here the Vayero is coming, based on this story of the Rebbe Rashab, that nowadays we have the ability to be mechanech children, that Elikus should become their whole life, Torah and mitzvahs becomes their whole life, to the extent that they're bothered so much they're going to be crying, why don't I have Gilui Elikus? And says the Rebbe, if for whatever reason we see a child that's not actually bothered to this extent, doesn't care about these matters, says the Rebbe, this is then the fault of the mechanech, of the educator, that it wasn't dvarim hayotzim in alev, it wasn't really coming from his heart, from the depths of his heart, because had it been, then he would have influenced the child in the same way. Says the Rebbe, this is all the Vayero that we have from the cry and the question or the demand of the Rebbe Rashab. But we also have a lesson from the answer of the Tzemach Tzedek. What does the Tzemach Tzedek say? The Tzemach Tzedek doesn't just say, oh, we can't compare to Avraham Avinu. The Tzemach Tzedek is saying what Avraham Avinu did. A tzaddik at the age of 99 years old decides that he needs to have a bris milah. And the message over here is that a child needs to understand that no matter how much he develops and how great he becomes and so on and so forth, there's always still room to be mal himself, to circumcise himself. That means he needs to work on removing the concealments, the blockages of the world, not to be nispal from the world, not to care about the world. That what should matter to him is only what Torah says, only what Hashem wants, and not what the world says. Now, just like we have from this story a powerful Vayero in the way we need to be mechanech a child in areas of bein adam lamokim, between man and Hashem, is yearning for elikus and for Torah and mitzvahs, says the Rebbe, there's also a very strong Vayero that we have from another story of the Rebbe Rashab in how one needs to conduct himself bein adam lachaveiroi. And here we have a story again from the Rebbe Rashab, whose birthday is Chof Cheshvon, when he was a little boy of 4 years old. And the tailor had come in with a garment that he had made for the Rebbe Rashab's mother, the Rebbitzin Rivka. And as they were looking and measuring the garment, and the Rebbe Rashab, as a little boy, pulled out of the tailor's pocket a little piece of the leftover material that technically should have gone with the garment to the Rebbe Rashab's mother. It was part of the material that was originally hers, that she had paid for. The tailor was very embarrassed and started giving excuses that he forgot about it, etc., etc. Afterwards, the Rebbe Rashab's mother told him off for embarrassing the tailor. The Rebbe Rashab again started crying very bitterly. It really bothered him that what just happened. Sometime later, he had gone into the Rebbe Maharash, to his father, and he asked, how could one have a tikkun for the Aveira of embarrassing someone? And when the Rebbe Maharash wanted to know why he's asking, he didn't want to tell the story. Later, his mother, Rebbitzin Rivka, asked the Rebbe Rashab, the little boy, why didn't you want to tell your father? So he says, wasn't it bad enough that I embarrassed the Yid once? Should I now be over on rechilus, on gossip and lashon hara? Now the Rebbe says, seemingly the embarrassment, you can't say it was such a terrible embarrassment. It wasn't something that he did intentionally. He did it innocently. It was by mistake. And it wasn't in public, it was only to his mother. And yet when he hears that this tailor was embarrassed, it bothers him so much that he starts crying bitterly. What's bothering him? It's not even so much the fact that because of him something bad happened, or that he's going to get a punishment or something like that. It actually bothers him terribly that this tailor was hurt, that he was embarrassed. And that's also why he doesn't want to tell his father exactly what happened, even though that itself could be a question of kibud av. His father is asking him something and he's not responding, because he's only doing it to correct the Aveira, because he couldn't handle the fact to be speaking about the negativity of another Yid. And again, says the Rebbe, since the story reached us and it was publicized, that is again a Vayero of how we need to educate a child, even at their youngest age, of how to be so sensitive to another person's feelings and care about another Yid. And the Rebbe says from here, we obviously have the lesson about the importance of chinuch, how much we need to try, both regarding our own children, a famous Pisgam also from the Rebbe Rashab, that just like it's a mitzvah midoraisa to put on tefillin every single day, regardless of how great you are in Torah or how simple you are, so too the Rebbe Rashab says it's an obligation for everyone to think a half hour about the chinuch of children and do everything we can, or even more than we can, to make sure the children are going in the right path. But the Rebbe says this is true both regarding our own children, but also if we see another child that's not getting the education that he's supposed to, we need to ensure that he too gets the proper education. And through this, we get to set up the Tzivus Hashem, which will go out of Galus, through Mashiach Tzidkeinu, B'Karev Mamash.